So our talk title this morning is The Science of Mind Symbol. And I want to preface it with a request that each one of us, as we think through this process, ensure that we are aware of not making judgment about ourselves or others, but ourselves, because whatever we give ourselves, we are giving to others. So I say that because when we look at the principles of science of mind, many a time people can misunderstand or misconstrue the intention back of it and feel like they should be judged for where they are today. And that is never the intention of science of mind. I was going to say any minister or practitioner in science of mind, but I think I'll just say science of mind, because I don't know everybody's intentions, I'm sure of that. But it is not the intention of science of mind. And Ernest Holmes states it over and over and over. Judge not. So what we are doing as we look at the symbol, which is the creative process, you'll hear those words a lot today. What we are doing is looking at where we are today and where we want to be tomorrow, or this afternoon, or in an hour from now. Just coming out of meditation, we might be feeling really good right now, but if you're like me, I know years ago, not anymore, but years ago, I was so pumped up when I would leave a Sunday service in New Thought. And then in the afternoon, if I had nothing to do, I would find myself going downhill and thinking, how does that happen? Until I found Science of Mind, and I was like, oh, it happened because I thought differently. And so that for me is a huge, huge gift that Science of Mind gives us. Remember to think purposefully and co-creatively to create our tomorrows by what we think right now. So that said, Science of Mind symbol. In Quick Start and Foundations in Science of Mind, which are the first classes taught in Science of Mind, it states religious science, which is Science of Mind, is a design for living based on the creative process of life itself. Now we use the teaching symbol, which is beautifully displayed here in stained glass, as a tool for explaining the universal creative process. Science of Mind correlates the laws of science, philosophical opinions and theories, great discussions, and the revelations found in religion into a simple set or a set of simple principles that can be practiced by each one of us in all areas of our life on a daily basis, a moment-to-moment basis. So we consider each person's natural state of being to consist of health, wealth, and happiness, to consist of the nature that God is. In holding false beliefs about the true nature of our life, we can at times obstruct our own well-being. When we do this, we experience conditions of discord, disharmony, dis-ease. But creating a habit of using the creative process consciously allows us to release those false beliefs, including judgments, and reveal the true wholeness of our divine nature. So we experience health, wealth, happiness. That is our truest, highest nature. Our founder, Dr. Holmes, devised and used the symbol to diagram what he meant by the descent of spirit into form. Another way to say the creative process in the individual. Descent of spirit into form. So explaining that symbol. the circle around the outside has many ideas, but they're all the same. Many words, shall I say, but they're all the same, really. Eternal, infinite, universal life, God, mind, unity, wholeness. Within the infinity, or universal whole, we have the Trinity, consisting of the Spirit, which in Science of Mind we use as a diagram as the top portion, soul, the middle portion in the diagram or symbol, and body, the lower part. Or, as we often say in Science of Mind, consciousness at the top into law creates the lower experience, conditions, forms, effects that are occurring because we live in the physical realm. The swoop of the arm, often we call it the V, is actually deeply meaningful. It represents the creative process as it moves into manifestation. Not a straight mechanical ascent back to source, but a flowing, living return. Here's how Holmes understood it. The downward sweep, the left side of the V, symbolizes Spirit's movement into creation, and that would be us. And this is also how we use it. The infinite top pouring itself through the law in the middle into form at the base. It's the universal process of divine idea becoming specific experience, where the invisible substance becomes visible. The upward sweep is the return to source. However, you'll notice that it doesn't go straight up. The right part shows the returning movement of creation back of Spirit. It doesn't go straight up because evolution isn't instantaneous or mechanical. It curves outward and upward to symbolize ideas like growth, expansion, evolution, enrichment of the wisdom experience.
Symbolism is really important to us because it helps to explain abstract ideas and themes and things that we don't readily pick up really easily. The symbol we used to describe the divine creative process as a teaching tool, as Deborah said, from our Science of Mind textbook. At the time of its inception, it was probably not really ever intended to be the logo or the brand identity for our international organization, but it has become to be known and represent Science of Mind. I remember when I was a young teen, I was in a Methodist church, and during catechism they took us through the entire church and showed us all the symbolisms on the walls and on the front of the pulpits and in our paperwork and so on, and told us that the three circles represented the Trinity, and doves represented peace, and all these things we would see are all over the sanctuary. And it helps to understand what our teaching is all about. And I thought it was interesting, as Kathy was talking about Christianity today, I don't remember what it was exactly she said, but I was thinking about the cross that represents the symbol for Christianity. And I read an interesting description of that one time, where it said that the horizontal line represents the separation between divinity and humanity, and the vertical line stands for the descent of divinity into humanity. So when Jesus came down into human form, he crossed that line, and so that line has been part of their symbolism ever since. So there's some very valuable pictures and ideas that we can actually see in symbolism that we don't necessarily pick up when we're reading things in a book. Everything originates, everything that we experience originates from undifferentiated substance. And undifferentiated substance is things that are just all put together and they haven't been brought into form yet. They're ideas in the mind of God, the realm of infinite possibilities that we have not yet experienced. It's like a creative medium, like clay. It's a lump of clay that hasn't been brought into anything that we can experience yet. It's just a lump of clay. And so that undifferentiated substance passes through the creative process into differentiated substance, different things, different items, individuals, and recognizable objects and conditions that we can actually experience in form. The substance may change into form, but the essence of the substance never changes. That's really important to understand. The substance may change into form, but the substance never changes, the essence. Whether it assumes form or not, it is always God stuff. That's why we can claim that we are made in the image and likeness of God. As each of us was created, we began as undifferentiated substance and passed through a creative process to finally take our own human identity. We began as God stuff within the realm of infinite possibility and ended up as God stuff in human form and never changed. And we are still God expressing in human form. And as Deborah said, the way the symbol works for the infinite God creation, God created the heavens and the earth, it works exactly the same way for us as co-creators in our life experience, bringing ideas and thoughts into manifestation that we can experience. So you and I are co-creators with the divine through the creative process. And that's why Jesus, knowing his relationship with the divine as a spiritual being living in human form, proclaimed that whatever he did, we could do also. He was the great example. In fact, his teachings are nothing more than explaining divine law, how it works, and how to use it. The Science of Mind teaching symbol is a descriptive tool to understand how divine law works, the mechanics behind the divine creative process, and how we bring our desires, ideas, wishes, thoughts, and so on into manifestation. In Hebrews, in the Bible, it says, what is seen comes from that which is not seen. In other words, everything we experience in form found its original inception in unformed possibility. In 2 Corinthians, it says, things which are seen are temporary, while things which are unseen are eternal. Which means that once something enters into parameters of physical form, it also takes on an element of time because space and time are interrelated. Divine possibilities lie in a state of eternal invisibility until they are brought into manifestation through consciousness. Once consciousness that created the form ceases, the form begins to disintegrate and return to its original unformed substance. Here's a simple example. If we took a bucket of Legos, we can assemble them into any form we can imagine. And when we're done with that form, we can tear the form apart and drop all the Legos back into the bucket again, and then we can create any new form that we can imagine. And this can go on indefinitely. It's an eternal process. If we create a man or a plant or an animal from a bucket of Legos, it may take on the general form of a man or whatever we desire to experience, but there was never any life essence or energy inherent in the Legos. So we'll never take on a quality of life. We cannot breathe life into inanimate form, but we can, through consciousness, create an animate life form from undifferentiated life substance. The undifferentiated substance comes from the one life, after all. Humanity's total physical life experience is found in that small, bottom, manifest level of the creative system. The infinite possibility of forms is available above that level, And we can imagine those possibilities, but we cannot literally experience those physical possibilities until they passed into manifestation or into form. Until we follow the creative process through divine law into manifestation. And then we can interact with those manifest conditions and forms to our heart's desire. And when we release the mental energy that created those ideas and forms and structures, they will eventually deteriorate into pure energy from which they came. Or more accurately, they'll return to the undifferentiated substance from which they came, and we can use that undifferentiated substance to create anything else we wish to experience. And of course, that doesn't mean we cannot mentally experience and use divine principles and non-physical qualities of divine life, which lie within the higher levels of the symbol. We are divine beings, so we can transcend the physical parameters in which we live and enhance our existence through alignment with our true spiritual nature. This is how we accomplish the level of living as divine beings in human form. We can experience divinity in both physical and spiritual form. Remember, we are one with the one. We came from it, we remain in it, and we are of it eternally. Everything in the bottom section of the symbol is within the full circle of the one being, the one life, the one circle of life. Ernest Holmes says every person is some part of the essence of God, not as a fragment, yet as totality. He's saying that we are not all that God is, but God is all that we are. He also says there's no such thing as your mind, my mind, and God's mind. There's only one mind in which we all live and move and have our being. And the only way that we can separate from that one mind, from that one being, is just to cease to exist. Not an option I choose.
No, me either. So it sounds like a lot, but the more that we practice it, the better we get at when we bump up against something that we don't like in our life and we don't want it that way. We get better and better at going, okay, I am spirit, and my thought, my conscious thought, is going to activate through the law to create for me, and I'm going to create what I want. So what is that? And what ideas do I need to hold in my mind in order to have that? So the process occurs for us each personally in two different ways. One, we are presently, each one of us, in form as spirit individualized. So it already is. And two, we are each using, consciously or not, the creative process to live either within our false beliefs, which is when life doesn't show up exactly the way we want it to, or we are optimizing the process toward living healthy, wealthy, happy lives in all areas of our individual and collective lives. Now, oftentimes in reflection, we have heard some one of us talking about how we have held an affirmation in mind until it was our reality. That's exactly what we're talking about today. And we all want to get so good at it that it shows up in every area of our life. This talk, our talk today, originated once again due to a thread in our ministers' listserv. So I'm going to share a few of other ministers around the country. Actually, one of them, I don't know where she lives. And I don't know her personally. Maybe Sandy even does. I don't know. We'll see. I'll tell you. But I'm going to begin with Dr. Holmes, our founder, who said spirit comes to a point of individualization in us, and from that point must consciously evolve upward. So wherever we are, we're going upward. no matter how we choose the thoughts that get us there. It, meaning the symbol, this is from Reverend Dr. Dennis Merritt Jones, who, if you don't follow him online, you might like to. He says a lot of great things. He wrote, "It, the symbol, is a graphic that depicts the creative process of infinite intelligence descending from the formless essence of I am, spirit, into form, body, and then returning to the formless when the mission is complete." Everything David just said. This is the minister I was talking about, Reverend Beverly Strutt. She wrote, "I was taught that it symbolizes continuity and shows that it's not a two-dimensional structure. The left-hand side is involution and the right evolution, and it continues around, connects, and repeats." So we can probably all think of ways that we are doing that in our own life or other ways. Consciously using the creative process toward greater happiness, harmony, prosperity, peace, joy, and love, along with any other idea that is of the nature of God, we contribute positively into the collective belief of all humankind, setting into motion an intention of a higher good for all people. Because as I said at the beginning, whatever we think about for ourselves, we are knowing for everyone else also, because there is only one. Have a wonderful week in the creative process.
So,